So, theologically speaking,
hello, and welcome to Theologically Speaking. I'm Kyle Leon Henderson.
and I'm Father Ian Elliott Davis.
And today we are talking about discipleship.
And I've got notes.
Mm-hmm. Part of the discussion we're going to get into today is digital discipleship later on. But that being said, here at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood, we have a digital discipleship team.
We do.
So I brought in some recruits. They're usually here off mic, but today I gave them a mic and I said, be ready to speak. We have Jeffrey Clark Tosca. Hello. And Janae Hernandez.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
And they're ready to chime in whenever they have thoughts, because this is not just an operation between you and me, and we're not over tea. And
it's inclusive.
It's very inclusive. Like we like to create a space that feels like we have tea and we're just having a casual conversation, but
whereas we've got pineapple
Fanta and a whole team to help us.
That's product placement, if ever I heard it.
Listen, I would love some sponsors. Is that bad to have sponsors for your church?
No, it's very good.
Oh, good. Well, discipleship. Let's start there. What is discipleship? Oh, your dog. You've put the dogs away, too.
The dogs are away, but
they're like
tormenting each other.
They're above our head, but are they friends?
They are friends, but you wouldn't think so.
Everybody knows Louie, beautiful Louie.
Yes.
He's been all over the Instagram, but you got Charlie now,
I've
too.
got Charlie the puppy.
And it sounds like Charlie's keeping Louie young.
Yes.
But
it's
anyway.
like the phrase, when the cat's away, the mice will play.
Right.
When the priest's away, the dogs will play.
Yes.
That's it.
And they're barking and everything.
They're going crazy. What is a disciple? Who were the disciples? Are we disciples? Are we in the same tradition as them? Disciples are people who follow Jesus. And we seek to follow Jesus in what we do, what we say, the way we act, the way we are with each other, the way we have relationships. It's meant to influence every aspect of our lives. Discipleship, being a follower of Jesus or a follower of Christ. It's interesting, the word disciple comes from a Latin root which means to teach, but also to learn. So, and it's the same in my own Welsh language as well. The word for to teach and to learn is the same, dysgu. And dysgwr can mean a learner or a teacher.
That's interesting. So that's what disciples are supposed to do, is teach and learn simultaneously as part of their work as disciples.
Yes. Yeah.
And anybody who is a follower of Christ is a disciple.
Yes. Yeah.
And I used to get that mixed up when I was younger, the apostles versus the disciples. Keep me straight on this. Apostles are people who followed Christ and knew Christ, right?
The apostles were those who had witnessed the life and death and resurrection of Christ.
So eventually, and some people are kind of fast and loose with who those were sometimes, but at the end of it, eventually that's cut off. There's no apostles living today on earth.
There
as
are.
We know. There are.
There are the successors of the apostles.
Oh, so the successors are that too.
Yes.
Okay, so that's why I got confused when I was little, because some people today are disciples and apostles, but we're all disciples if we follow Christ.
In our tradition, the bishops are the successors of the apostles.
Okay.
Because as you may remember, when Judas Iscariot had betrayed Christ and then took his own life, they needed to elect another apostle in his place, and Matthias was chosen after drawing lots. And so Matthias was chosen as the successor of Judas Iscariot. And ever since then, the apostles have laid hands on the next generation of apostles, and all the way down through the bishops of the church.
So everybody today can link their laid hands.
Everyone who's been ordained can can trace their heritage, if you like, back through.
Well, and
the
really,
bishops.
we in the apostolic succession can as well,
Right.
because Bishop Shin from New York laid
Yes.
hands on my head to confirm me
There we are.
as an Episcopalian.
Yeah.
So you've had hands, we've all had hands laid upon us.
Yes. Yeah.
But discipleship, those are, again, followers of Christ. What is discipleship? What is the work we are called to do in discipleship beyond learning and teaching? What does that look like?
To imitate the life of Jesus, to imitate his life, to try and live according to his precepts and teachings, and most notably the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And blessed are. So trying to follow in that way.
For you, I mean, it's kind of clear that being a learner and a teacher, you give a sermon each week. So that is discipleship, teaching.
Right.
What for people who are not preachers, what is the teaching portion? What is the
way we live our lives is, St. Francis of Assisi said, preach the gospel to everyone, everywhere, at all times. And if you must, use words. What he meant was that we should be, our actions, who we are, the way we think, the way we relate, should show that we are followers of Jesus.
And so that would be, for what we believe as Christians, treating others with respect and being kind to the poor and the needy and helping where we can. Is that
Yes,
that's part of the
that is
discipleship? Is, if a beggar comes to you on the street and says, "Please, can I have $1?" or whatever, and if you've got $1 to give, you give it to him.
Yes.
And that's so. What is the difference between discipleship and evangelism?
Evangelism is going out and preaching specifically with the aim of encouraging people to become disciples.
Are evangelicals, evangelism, are people that do that? Are they doing...
There's all one root, which is euangelion, which means good news. And from that, we get evangelical and evangelist and evangelism. And it's all rooted in the good news that is Jesus Christ.
And the people who preach on the streets and go knock on doors, are they doing good work, or is that... something you can make that assessment
they would see that
of?
as being evangelism. Personally, I don't think that that's terribly constructive, going and knocking on people's doors or standing on street corners with big signs saying, the end is nigh, be saved. You've got to be saved, otherwise you will perish in everlasting hellfire. I don't think that that's terribly
Well, because in our
helpful.
tradition, the fire and the brimstone and that type of evangelical speech and way of thinking isn't really what we subscribe to, is it?
Right. Well, there's a very old tradition of our church that says we are Catholic by order, but evangelical by truth. So meaning that we have the universal church is our polity. So we have bishops, priests, deacons, and lay people.
And that's what Catholic, the word...
the widest sense of the word.
Lowercase Catholic means the universal
church, yes.
I'd like to explain that, because I remember, because if people hear Catholic, they think Roman Catholic,
Right.
from the Pope, and that's not what that means.
No,
The
not
Catholic,
necessarily.
Little c Catholic means the church, the
Right.
church universal.
Yes.
So
Well, the church is east and west. We need kind of a really quick history lesson, and we need to remember that the church split in the very early period of round about the 10th, 11th century, split between east and west. And the patriarch of the east and the patriarch of the west both excommunicated each other as they just fell out. and we've lived with that split ever since. So we are part of the Western Church because we live in the West, but there are also Orthodox here in the West as well now, whereas the Orthodox used to be just in the east of the Church. It's very complicated, and in fact there used to be 5 patriarchs, not just 2, and it was the ancient pentarchy is what they were called, the 5 patriarchs.
Oh, wow. See, and that's what I said last week. Every show leads to more questions that leads to
Right.
more shows, because the 5, what are they called?
Patriarchs.
What were they called, though?
The pentarchy.
The pentarchy.
Yeah.
That I could do a whole show about the pentarchy, just to ask you follow-up questions. So, but the notion of discipleship, learning and teaching, has been there from the beginning, right?
Yes. Yes.
And what did Christ say about discipleship?
Christ said, "Come and see." Simply that. That was the invitation. He said to Nathanael, that call of Nathanael at the beginning of St. John's Gospel, where they say, "Come and see someone who told us everything we ever knew about ourselves. Come and see." And that's repeated over and over again in St. John's Gospel. And that's what the Christian message is, basically. Come and see. There's no kind of hidden agenda. It's simply coming to be in our fellowship, to be together and to worship and to find God in one another and in our Eucharistic worship.
Do you think that different people have different and unique ways to bring people to come and see, or
Yes.
do you think that there is a finite amount of ways to bring people in and come and see?
I think there's an infinite number of ways to come and see because there are an infinite number of types of people in the world, and for every type of person there is their own journey, their own faith journey that they take. And that's diverse and magnificent and glorious and amazing, as our bishop says to us, amazing Episcopalians.
I like that. How has discipleship I guess that this kind of is counterintuitive to my last question, the unique ways we bring people to the faith, to the fold, but how has it evolved over the centuries up until now? What is,
Well,
are there fads in discipleship? Are there, things that people did back then, or does it all sort of like what we talked about a few episodes ago, the 7 deadly sins? All sin can be categorized a little bit in it touches on something of the 7 deadly sins. You know what I mean?
Happened in the earliest days of the church was that everyone met and held everything in common, we're told in the Acts of the Apostles. And slowly but surely, the structure of the church formed and was formalized, so that there were the apostles who would preach the gospel and teach, and then they appointed deacons who would care for the widows and orphans and the other members of the church who were less fortunate. And that was one of the great appeals of the Christian message, was that widows and orphans were normally ostracized and sent to the edges of society. But the Christian church valued widows and orphans and said, these people are special and important and we must value them.
Yeah. And that's something we still talk about to this day.
Right.
So there is a through line of where our focus can be on who we want to reach and how we want to reach them, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But do you think it's important to diversify the ways you're reaching out as a group of people, or do you think it's more important to have a cohesive message?
Well, I think the message it forms naturally in each one of us. I don't think that there is a kind of a prototype that we have to adhere to. I don't think that there's an outline that we have to follow precisely and in details. But the brush strokes, the broad brush strokes, are that we seek to, what would Jesus do, as the old saying goes. It is old now, I think, even though it was quite modern when I first heard it. What would Jesus do?
Oh, that. The bracelets and the...
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I was in 5th grade when I wore at least 7 "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets on my arm.
You
At any
did?
given time, yeah. And then they had
Oh.
others that people don't really know about. There was frog and dog. Frog was fully rely on God.
Oh.
And then dog was depend on God.
Oh.
Those were some bracelets at the Christian bookstore that we had
Right.
too. So, little nugget of trivia for you there.
we are.
But yeah, what would Jesus do? That is, I mean, it's marketable, but it's also useful.
It's a good kind of rule to judge against
Do you
what
think
we do.
there is a place for marketing in discipleship?
It depends what you mean by marketing, really, I suppose.
Well, we'll take for instance the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets. That was marketed. That was
Right.
mass marketed. That was mass produced, and people bought them at the Christian bookstores. I mean,
Right.
you know about it, and you're from Wales, and I knew
Right.
about it. I'm from Alabama, and it was a
Right.
concept that people knew worldwide. So, is that marketing important and useful, or is it exploitative? Exploitative? Exploitative, in a sense.
Exploitative.
Exploitive? Oh, exploitative, not exploitative.
Oh, well, we say exploitative in Britain.
Well, you also say aluminium.
We do say aluminium. But
That's too
so
many
did you.
letters.
So did you up until the 1950s.
Well, are you avoiding my question?
I am.
Maybe I could speak to that a little bit.
Please
Yes,
do.
do.
You are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trivia on you. You're a marketing
Ex-
executive.
I am in marketing. That's correct.
Yes.
So I think that when people often hear the term marketing, it can kind of bring about some greasy, slimy imagery that you're like, ooh, they're coercing me, they're forcing me, they're tricking me, they're making me buy something that I didn't think I needed or something to that effect. Because quite often, quite honestly, that's what marketing is supposed to do, right? Convince you to buy something that you didn't think you needed, wanted, whatever. And marketing is referring to the market, as in,
Yeah.
like, as a whole, the market, selling, buying, all of that. So I see what you mean in this question about the WWJD bracelets, bookmarks, T-shirts, whatever it was that we all had in the 90s. Was it marketed? Probably, because it was a product, and all products are marketed, and it doesn't mean that they're in a way that makes you feel gross. It's
Yeah.
just that's part of the process of the economy of letting people know that your product exists. That's what marketing is at its core. So yes, so if you, even if you just saw that it was on sale, that's a type of marketing, and
Yeah.
maybe would, get you to buy that or something, or you saw someone else wearing it, it's word of mouth. That's kind of how that goes. So to just simply answer the question, was it marketed? Yes. Is that exploitative? Well, who made that bracelet? I mean, was it made by slaves in another country?
Right.
Oof.
I guess we'd have to do some research,
That's
wouldn't
the
we?
thing.
Yeah.
To figure out if that's
Yeah.
exploitative
But
or
if
not.
you, by your own consent, walked into the Christian bookstore and they said, "Hi, can I help you find anything?" And you're like, "Yes, I'm looking for a bracelet." And they say, "Look at all these bracelets, and these ones are on sale that say WWJD."
Yeah.
Kind of stumbled over that, but yeah, it's hard to say fast. Then, that's not exploitative at all. That is marketing. That is a product
Yeah.
being sold. You want it because we all like to purchase things that we feel represent us, and that would
Right.
be an example of that. So really, I guess we would never want to exploit, but we do want to make others aware of the fact that there is a church and it is here and you should come.
That's a good point. That brings up another point to me of, thank you for that explanation, by the way, Janae. But like, not exploit, and she explained exploitative practices. We would need more information, but selling it to people is not necessarily a bad thing. How important or effective is it to, I remember my grandfather used to tell me this. He's like, because there would be people driving around at the grocery store and they had a cart, because in Alabama you don't have to have a license plate on the front, only on the back. So you could get a decorative plate for your front of your car in Alabama, and people would put on "I'm a Christian" or "Jesus saves" or any of that. And my grandfather would say, they don't need to do that. They just need to live a good Christian life. That's how you tell people. But and I agree with him. You don't have to, but is that something that we would respect and find it to be an effective tool to show people, to say it out loud, to say, I follow Christ, or
just be a follower of Christ,
follower.
And through one's actions show that one is following Christ in what one does and says, and the way one lives. I'm interested about the marketing question because I want to know, do people think that the Christian message is a product that can be sold?
That's such a good question.
I've never thought about that.
That's a very good question. I think that something that's very interwoven in American culture is thinking about everything as consumable, including the Christian message sometimes. I think that no matter what it is, and I'm not saying we should feel, maybe we should feel a little bad, but I do think this is a product of our culture, the way that we are raised in America, that we often think of things in terms of what does that do for me? What will that do for me? Right? Consumable kind of. So even just this example of the bumper sticker on a car that says, I'm a Christian, you have to ask, did that consumer of that bumper sticker, the person who bought it, was that really to spread the message, or was that a personal self feel-goodery kind of thing to buy and put that on his car and drive around and let everybody know, hey, I'm a Christian, and that makes him feel good? Was it really to spread the message? Because you could argue there's a lot better ways to do that, such as, case in point, living a Christian life, as you mentioned. So I think that does also apply to Christianity and to the message of Jesus. And maybe that's why so many churches in America focus on the things that are easily explained, quick, easy facts about Jesus, facts about you, and if you're going to go to heaven or hell, things that are kind of pitched to you in a way that's bite-sized, consumable, when really that is just a very American cultural way of looking at it, I would say. But that's just my 2 cents. And I also don't think I don't think that's 100% hard fast rule. I think I'm definitely generalizing there, but I do think,
I was going to say, she said American way of looking at it. I would just add the caveat of Western world way of looking at it, just because I think Canada is probably pretty similar. England is probably pretty similar, in the UK. And, the way that we market ourselves in the West is all kind of I just watched The Crown last night. I consume their products just as much as they consume our products. So there is a Western way of doing it, I think.
Right. I'm starting to feel slightly uncomfortable about the idea that believers are customers, that we are buying a product. Because I happen to think that religion is bigger than the free market economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that what religion talks about and is concerned about is ultimate values and ultimate ends and the goal of what creation is.
Well, and the religious aspect of it, it has existed before marketing tools, and it will exist after marketing tools.
Right.
And I think if you twist it into a way, this is just my thoughts, and I want your opinion or your take on it, because if you twist it in a way that it becomes serviceable to the marketing rather than the marketing being serviceable to the religion, I think that gets into a big trouble, don't you think?
Well, I mean, I belong to a church that is the established church in England, for example, and it would be very hypocritical of me to point the finger and say, well, you lot over there, you're kind of not living up to the gospel. You're not living up to the message of Jesus Christ because you've got X number of dollars in the bank or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and that's leading me to a couple of other questions, if I may. One is with the whole concept of wearing Christianity on your shirt, on your bumper stickers, on your everything. Is that important to tell people we're Christian, or is it important not to tell people we're Christian, but to show them what Christianity is?
I think it's more important to show what Christianity is.
Should we not? I mean, is telling people you're Christian, like saying it out loud, not in a showy way, but just saying it out loud, is that still important, or is it not important? It's all about the actions, not the words.
It is about the actions, not the words. And the Epistle of St. James is very clear about that faith without works is dead. It doesn't matter what you say. If your actions don't match your words, then one is a hypocrite. Which is what Jesus railed against, hypocrisy and that kind of strict adherence to the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law.
Can you be a disciple without being able to speak?
Yes.
How?
Undoubtedly, you can be a disciple without being able to speak. I can think of people who were born with physical disabilities, and I have learnt from them the Christian message in the profoundest way. And they don't necessarily have the abilities to speak, but they have the ability to love. And I think that's the difference, is being able to love. Some people have been hurt and would find love difficult, but I think there's the chance, the opportunity for everyone to find true love, which is in God. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that Christ is the body language of God, and we embody Christ today. That's what we seek to do.
That's so wonderful. I love the way you put that. Because we do have these tactile instances, like with communion,
right?
With us partaking of communion, that makes us the body.
Yes.
To maneuver God's word throughout the world, right?
Yes. The Eastern Orthodox teach that the Holy Communion, the bread and the wine, becomes not just the body and blood of Christ, but the resurrected body and blood of Christ. And that as one swallows and drinks the Holy Communion, one is transformed into Christ more and more.
That's fantastic. And that just all, the mobility of it all is interesting. That type of concept of thinking that we are the mobility vehicles for the Word of God to take it from the altar out into the world. And it kind of lends back to what Janae was saying about marketing. Is it selling something, or is it just telling people we're here? And I want you to speak on that just a little bit. Like, are we trying to sell the world God, and not in a malicious way or in a skeezy way, but just, are we trying to convert people to God in the way that some people think you're supposed to? Or is that our job, just to tell people God's here?
Yes, I think it's just our job to tell people that God is here.
We're not meant to
and
bring people in, and
come and see is the invitation.
I love that. Well, and that being said, that brings us to digital discipleship. Because in our pre-production stuff, we were talking about how there was a time when people would read the morning newspaper and watch the evening news. And it was only in special times, for instance, like when John F. Kennedy was shot.
Oh,
They broke into television and told you right away, this is what's happening. And they, they rushed news reports to the outlets. But other than something that horrific, you got your news in very specific ways and
very controlled
controlled ways, and probably very controlled from the powers that be of the newspaper or the television station. They controlled what was the message. But that's just not the case anymore. People get their news from people, Facebook had to go to Congress to debate whether or not they're even a news source, or are we social media, or are we a news source? They have a news link on their page, so I guess they're news, and that's how some people get their news. My point is, people get stuff from everywhere.
We're bombarded
with ways to get it. You have a TikTok, which I suggest everyone follow, because it is just a tiny little chunk of beautiful in your day, and I love it. But, they have so many ways. How is it important to reach people in the new ways that are developed to be reached?
Yes, I think so. I think we can use any means that's at our disposal, so long as it's ethical and moral.
Well, and that leads me right into my next question of what is our responsibility in sort of navigating new frontiers of discipleship. What do we have a responsibility beyond moral, or flesh that out? What is moral?
Well, the thing that's impressed me about digital discipleship is that it's opened up so many more possibilities, that we're able to reach so many more people that may have heard about us in the past, but now can actually participate in worship with us.
Right. And what's fascinating to me, and Jeff and Janae, I would love for y'all to chime in on this, is I feel like, because we now have a digital discipleship team, meaning just people who work on the digital discipleship, which... Let us define that. I want to define what digital discipleship means to us, and and how it translates to the greater world. Before we go forward, what would we consider digital discipleship to be as this digital discipleship team?
Well, just as we were saying at the beginning of this podcast, that discipleship is both teaching and learning, and I think that is exactly what takes place. Really. I would say a large part, as most of you I'm sure know, of our digital discipleship is that our services are available to be streamed in your home. And that's a wonderful thing, because that is accessibility. But also this very podcast is digital discipleship. It's digital format, and it is teaching and learning that we do together, but that you also get to do while you listen. But yes, it does. It is accessibility, and it's opening doors for people who, just as Father Davis just said, like that have wanted to come and haven't been able to, and now they can. And Jeff, I'm sure you can share like where some of the regions of the world that we know people have tuned in from and are right there in mass with us, but from afar.
Yeah, we've had people from Australia, South Africa, the UK, who have listened in and would not be able to otherwise. But what really amazes me is people that usually do come to church and can't make it there that Sunday. Happen to be
well, Janae, she's got a little one who's almost 22 months, right?
Yes. That's right, and her nap time is usually around the time of Mass, but I still want to be there. I still want to attend, so I tune in, and it's wonderful.
Right.
And what's interesting to me is that I you probably know more about this, Janae, is just the fascinating way that accidents lead to innovation. because we were live streaming our Mass before pandemic. There was a phone at the back of the church. It was very primitive the way we were doing it. And it was hard to hear, but the thing is, what people might not understand, and I the only reason I can speak on this is because I'm fascinated by it, is that when you hold the Eucharist up and the wine up, it might have been you who told me this, or it might have been a friend of mine in New York who's a priest. He said that was done to indicate to people at the back of the church that Christ is present. And so watching it in our primitive ways we used to do it, you still had the movements and the kneelings, and you understood as a churchgoer what that meant. But because of the pandemic, that's the only way people could watch was online.
Right.
And we had to figure it out at that time during the pandemic. And then because we did that, we actually have an angel offering who wanted, they said because they were following the news wherever they get their news, that things were developing in the pandemic, and they knew that people were going to start going back into buildings and this and that. And they wrote to us and said, I can't lose this.
Right.
I can't lose that. You do a specific theology, a specific liturgy for Anglo-Catholic traditions, and I love it, and I want to keep going. So they donated money for us to make it possible, and we did that. And so, and then Jeff, I think it was you who came to me and was like, "Hey, I got an idea for a podcast." And so here we are in season 3 of a podcast. And Janae, she came to us a while back, and she's like, "You're not on TikTok." And my question is why? And so it just kind of kept accidentally going. I mean, what is your take on that? On all the things that have developed over the last 2 years?
Divine providence. I mean, I remember celebrating Mass in this very dining room, at this very dining table. And
Jeff just pointed at the big black circle on your ceiling when you almost lit the house on fire from all the candles.
All the candles, and the Paschal candle, which is too tall for the dining room, and that's why there's a big black mark on the ceiling.
So, I mean, we have so much more. Digital discipleship did start with online streaming of Mass, and that is a permanent mainstay of our digital discipleship, but we're always developing new things.
Yes.
What are your hopes and desires in that? And one more thing, because I want to just let you talk in just a minute, because I talk way too much. And Joan told me that the other night. She's like, let him finish the conversation. And so, Joan, I love you, and I'm going to, but I'm just on fire for this right now. I don't even remember what I was going to say.
Oh, no.
Because I just thought I'm talking so much.
You're just jabbering on.
Yeah, so what are just answer that first question. What are your hopes for the future of digital discipleship?
To get to know more people, and that more people would be engaged and would participate. And participation doesn't mean to say you've got to be there in person, because some people can't be. My parents live 5,500 miles away, so they can't be in church every Sunday, but they can participate in worship with us, and they look forward to that.
Can you tell, do you have any stories about the people you've met through digital discipleship that you would never have otherwise met?
Well, Diane Becker in Maryland, who is very, very ill. She's the lady that we have been praying for a long, long time.
Yeah, we dedicated an episode.
That's right.
Of our podcast to her in season 2.
I would never have met her unless it was for the digital discipleship work that we...
Well, and Joan, too. Joan
and
comes
Joan
from the
Johnson.
mountains. Yep. So she's been very prolific and very supportive in all of the efforts. She listens to the podcast, and she watches Mass every time she's not here. Sometimes she comes down. She'll make the trip now, and she never did before digital discipleship. She comes to the church.
And we don't do anything extraordinary or out of the anything unusual. We carry on with our liturgy in the way that it's always gone. I mean, the one difference is we have the prayer for spiritual communion, and I think that's vital, because that acknowledges that there are people participating in the worship, in the liturgy, who are at home, who are unable to be there in person.
And I think it's important for people to understand that that is something we can do, because even when you come to church, we do not drink the wine.
Right.
Because it's just too risky with pandemic,
COVID,
and
yes.
we have to keep it individual. We cannot share the communal communion in that
Right.
way right now.
And we long to.
I do. I miss it. I
Yeah.
really do. But what else do you want to see? That was my other question. I remembered it now. What else do you want to see? Like, where would you want to go from here?
I think people putting their faith into practice would be a good thing. That we actually live out the message of the gospel, and that we treat each other with respect and with love and devotion, and that we become more aware and more sensitive to the culture in which we live.
Do you think it's important for people who are disciples? Do you think it's important for them to embrace technology?
Yes, I think there's an opportunity there to reach more people, and if there's an opportunity, then we should take it.
Well, I mean, that's what the apostles did, right? They embraced technology by writing it down, if they could, or using the means they could to pass it along. Right?
And then think of the invention of the printing press. That's a huge technology boom, and it was used to spread the word of the Lord, to print Bibles, and some people thought that shouldn't be so.
Right.
But then you have to question, well, why not?
Yeah.
You know?
If it weren't for the printing press, we would never have Bibles.
Right.
Like, we would never, because I've got, 3 or 4 in my house. It's like, I've got the Word of God 3 or 4 times over. And
Well, that's good.
centuries
And you've got
ago.
it on your phone in an app
Yeah,
now, too.
I've got it on my phone, and I got my daily prayers on my tablet. So, I mean, the digital age is here, and I'm proud to be a part of the work in the digital age.
Good. That's very good.
Did you have a poem?
How
do you come to a podcast reading and not know you're going to be asked to read a poem?
Shame.
Freestyle.
Oh.
Do some slam poetry.
I was about to say
Oh.
Yeah.
slam poetry.
Let's do it.
Yeah, but you've got to have a beat for that,
That's
haven't
what
you?
I was doing.
I can't.
Before we go, I just want to remind everybody what is actually going on in digital discipleship. So I'm going to leave that to Jeff and Janae.
Thank you. Well, you can catch us 4 days a week live streaming. So we live stream daily Mass Tuesday and Wednesday, Latin Mass on Saturday, and High Mass on Sundays.
And that can be found where?
That can be found on Facebook and YouTube.
Perfect. And what are you bringing to the table, Janae, for digital
Also you
discipleship?
can follow our church on Instagram. That's a great place to see beautiful photos of the church, of the flowers, things like that. Little details that you might have missed, I would say. Sometimes I see pictures and I'm like, wait, where is that?
Because they always say the love is in the details.
That's true. I really love it. They're just beautiful reminders throughout your day, I think, when you follow the Instagram account, as well as blessings that are written in, right? That's what they're blessings, right? Yes. There we go. Yes. Okay.
Perfect. And then, of course, the TikTok, right?
And then, of course, yes. So Father Davis has a TikTok. Your handle is
Canon Ian Davis.
right. At Canon Ian Davis,
And
and
it's-
it's spelled Davies,
Oh,
but
yes.
it's Davis.
Yep. CANONIANDAVIES.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I think that. Is there anything else?
Well, this podcast.
And this podcast.
So
Yes, this
if-
The
podcast.
podcast.
Make sure you
But
subscribe.
if you have found this podcast, you already know a little bit about our work here at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood, but definitely subscribe and, sign up for our notifications so you can get them. Theologically Speaking is a production of Church Nerds Productions. Executive producers for the show are Jeffrey Clark Tosca, Father Ian Elliott Davis, and Kyle Leon Henderson. Associate producer is Ed Tosca. Editors for the show are Kyle Leon Henderson and Jeffrey Clark Tosca. Music for this program is provided by Dr. Jeffrey Parola and the choir at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood. We'd also like to give a special thanks to Louie for all the loving licks on the knee under the table while we produce this show. Visit St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood Facebook page for more information on the show, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram at St. Thomas Hollywood.